Hi, and welcome to Inquiry with Mirage. In my first video, where I evaluated libertarianism as a normative theory of rightness and wrongness, I invoked a concept known as the wrong kind and right kind of reasons explanation as an explanatory tool for evaluating whether or not libertarianism made sense as a normative theory of rightness and wrongness. Now, I think this explanatory tool of the right kind and the wrong kinds of reason is incredibly useful for thinking in general, and hence it's a tool that I'm gonna keep using in the videos I make when either dissecting different arguments, evaluating different theories, or analyzing different explanations. However, I know that this is a tool that many of you might not be familiar with or may not be as familiar with as you would like to be. So this video is simply dedicated to further unpacking this explanatory tool of evaluating explanations, arguments, and analysis based on whether or not they operate on the right kinds of reasons or the wrong kinds of reasons. So ponder these two arguments for why you should not commit a crime. Argument 1 goes, if there's an evil demon which would torture you for all eternity, then you should not commit a crime. There is such an evil demon which will torture you for all eternity. By conclusion, via modus ponens, you should not commit a crime. The second argument goes, if there's an absolute certainty that you would get caught if you were to commit a crime, then you should not commit a crime. There is an absolute certainty that you would get caught if you were to commit a crime. Conclusion via modus ponens, you should not commit a crime. Now, these are two different arguments for why you should, that offer an explanation for why you should not commit a crime. These arguments are valid, they're like logically true, so to speak, and we can also stipulate, just for the sake of inquiry here, that the premises in these arguments are sound, i.e. there actually exists such an evil demon out there that would torture you for all eternity if you were to commit a crime, and there's an absolute certainty that if you were to commit a crime, you would get caught. Now, so we have two arguments that are both valid and sound as to why you should not commit a crime. Both of these arguments also seem to offer some kind of reason for why you in fact shouldn't commit this crime. That is to say that if you were aware of these arguments, and given that we have stipulated the premises of these arguments to be true, and given the fact that these arguments are logically valid, then you have a reason not to commit a crime, and if you were to act in opposition towards that reason and commit a crime anyway, then you would be acting in some way irrationally, all other things held equal. Yet it seems as if both of these arguments don't capture the true reason for why it is that you or people in general shouldn't commit crimes, even though they are logically valid and their premises are sound, and hence the arguments are overall true. This is to say then that these arguments for why you shouldn't commit a crime seem to be based on the wrong kind of reason. They have an explanation that doesn't seem to be based on the correct kind of reasons. Because, presumably, the reason for why you shouldn't commit a crime, or why I shouldn't commit a crime, or for why anyone shouldn't commit a crime, will have to do with factors such as, if I were to commit crime, I would harm innocent people, or I would break the social contract, or have a duty towards the state or towards other people in my society that I ought not commit crimes. So the explanation we're looking for, the true explanation, the robust explanation we're looking for as to why you, I, or anyone in society shouldn't commit a crime, does not have to do with the possibility or even in the truth of an evil demon that would torture us for all eternity, and or the fact that there's a certainty that we would get caught. Such explanations seem to be based on weaker types of reasons, but the true and strong reason, i.e. the correct reason for why we shouldn't commit a crime, will be an explanation which makes reference to some of the facts that I mentioned before, such as the fact that we have a duty towards our fellow human beings, towards the state, towards the people we share society with, not to commit crimes. So in all types of normative arguments, it is not sufficient for the argument to be valid and sound as for us to conclude or judge that argument to be true, all things considered. We also want the argument to be based on the correct kind of reasons and not on the wrong kinds of reasons. Now, before moving on and further illustrating what it means to have explanations that are based on the right kinds of reasons, and why this is something that I think generalizes to explanations more broadly outside the philosophical realm, I just want to note one point of nuance here. That point of nuance is that, yes, so now we have added in an extra variable for understanding and differentiating good explanations from bad explanation in terms of the wrong and the right kind of reasons, evaluations of explanations. But this is not an exhaustive unpacking of all the different criteria we could use to evaluate explanations, arguments, and theories on. There are many more criteria out there, such as, for example, whether or not the given explanation accords with our best meta-explanatory values, and such as whether it coheres with the rest of the important theorizing we're doing in interrelated fields to the given explanation we are evaluating at the specific moment. So, but those things might be like topics for another video. In this video, let's just stick to the wrong and the right kind of reason evaluative criteria. Now, as I said before, I think this is a evaluative criteria, an explanatory criteria, which generalizes to descriptive explanations and scientific theories more generally speaking. Consider, for example, when seeking to explain why a given house burnt down that was struck by lightning. Now, one explanation we could offer is that the lightning burnt down the house. Another explanation we could offer is that the house was made by flammable material. And a third explanation we could offer is the fact that the owner of the house forgot to unplug his chargers. Now, any given one of those explanations, when used as a singular explanation, would seem to be an explanation for why the house burnt down that is based on the wrong kinds of reason. However, if we were to offer a conjunctive explanation, that is to say, an explanation for why the house burnt down that took into account all three of those factors, that is the lightning striking the house, the fact that it was built by flammable material, and the fact that the owner of the house forgot to unplug his chargers, then it seems that in comparison to just offering a disjunctive explanation, which only takes one of those factors into account, a conjunctive explanation is an explanation which is more approximate to being an explanation that is based on the right kinds of reason for why the house burnt down. The reason then for why I think that the wrong and right kind of reason tool for evaluating explanation generalizes to descriptive inquiries more generally is because in the majority of scientific inquiries, we will be looking for causal explanations. So we will have a question of how something happened, why something happened, or how something could come to happen, and then we will be looking for the causal answer to those questions, right? But as demonstrated, I hope, by the case of the house being struck by lightning and asking the question of why it burned down, is that what constitutes the correct causal explanation when considering all of the multiple causal variables that will be present in any given empirical case will be the causal explanation which builds on the correct kinds of reason in the given case. This is why an explanation for why the lion ate the lamb that makes reference to the movement of atoms, the interactions of electrons, and the laws of nature, although it will be a causal explanation to some extent, assuming that such an explanation could be offered, it won't be the correct causal explanation because it seems to be an explanation which is built on the wrong kinds of reason, whereas an explanation for why the lion ate the lamb that is built, for example, upon facts such as that the lion was hungry, that the lion is a predator that eats meat, that the lamb is a source of meat, that the lamb is an animal which the lion typically eats, and that this particular lamb was vulnerable to be eaten, seems to, in comparison to the atom-based, electron-based, and laws of nature-based explanation, be an explanation which is based and built on more of the correct kinds of reason in the given situation. To summarize, then, when doing explanations, it is not sufficient that the explanations are valid and sound. They ought also be based on the right kinds of reason. and not be based on the wrong kinds of reasons. Now, what constitutes the right kind of reason in any given case will depend on a multitude of factors, such as our meta-explanatory values, what the given explanandum is, and what our expectations are of the true explananza, and also our intuitions in many cases. At this point then, I take it that if you weren't familiar with the wrong and right kind of reason, explanatory, evaluative criteria of theories, arguments, and explanations, you are somewhat familiar with it now, and I hope that if you were somewhat familiar with it before, you are a bit more familiar with it now. And again, I really do think that, yeah, this is like a very important analytical tool, conceptual tool, explanatory tool that we should carry with us, because it really enables us to think more deeply and profoundly about certain questions. Because if you think about it, it is kind of easy to always just have arguments which are valid and built on premises which are true, and then hence you have valid and sound argument. Like, all of those things are usually, well, I mean, they're hard, but they're usually not that hard to do. But where it becomes really hard to do inquiry, where it becomes really challenging to think about things truly and correctly, is when incorporating the fact that we want these arguments, we want our explanation, we want our theories to be built on the right kinds of reason. Alright, well, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. In the below, I'm gonna link to my Twitter, and if you want to interact further, please feel free to reach out and contact me there. Yeah.